year at the moment, and a very wet and rainy time of year in Korea. I'm from a small country in Europe called England. This is a small country. It's a small country, slightly bigger than Korea, not usually known for its weather, or it's known as a country of bad weather. But I can honestly say, folks, that at the moment we're having a hotter summer than you are in Korea, than we are in Korea. It's currently about 32, 33 degrees in England, and for English people, we don't know what to do when that happens. Because we don't have air conditioning in our buildings. We don't need it. The summer's usually 19, 20, 21 degrees. And then every 10 or 15 years, we have a really hot summer. Nobody knows what to do. And at the moment, everybody's baking, frying in England. That will go with the food as well. So, welcome to Samuel University. Pastor has asked me to speak today, this Sabbath, the next Sabbath, and I'm trying to connect both sermons. And we're going to be looking at a theme of touching the untouchable. Touching the untouchable. I'm a very touchy person. I don't mean as in sensitive or moody. I mean, I like to touch. We have 5 senses, and touch is one of those senses. And as an English person and as a European person, we're still European. We've voted Brexit, so we're not going to be European soon, which is tragic. But I'm still European. Actually, I'm going to get an Irish passport soon. My mother is Irish. I'm going to get my Irish passport so I can still be a European. That's important to me, to be European. As Europeans, we're very touchy. You come to England or you go to France and you greet somebody, you greet them not with a bow, not with a handshake, but with a hug and even a kiss. If you go to France, they just kiss everybody. 4 kisses. Now, when I came to Korea 16 years ago, I came with a very European British mindset. And when I started to meet people, I was hugging them and kissing them. And in Korea, as you know, you don't always do that. First time I met my mother-in-law, which is scary, isn't it? First time you meet your mother-in-law is a very scary moment, especially Ajima. Super scary. And I met my mother-in-law for the first time, and you know, it's a big deal. My wife's Korean, I'm a foreigner, I'm English, I'm not Korean. That was a big problem at the start. So I'm meeting her and I'm thinking, just play it cool, Andrew. Don't say anything you shouldn't say. Just be polite. And the first time I met her, she saw me, I just walked up to her and gave her a big kiss on the side of her face. To which my mother-in-law kind of stood back and told me it's been a long time since a man had kissed her. Good job I can't speak to a husband. Touch. When I was dating my wife, you know, in Korea, you don't know the customs and the culture, and you're dating a person from another culture, you're very concerned that you don't do the wrong thing or say the wrong thing. And I remember dating my wife for a while, and then one day we were on the subway train in Seoul. And we dated for a while, and then suddenly she needed something to hold on to because the train was moving. She couldn't reach the top of the bar. She had nowhere to hold, and she looked at me and she grabbed my hand. The first time she touched me. And I almost melted. The power of a touch. If somebody touches you, it is powerful. So this Sabbath, next Sabbath, we're going to be looking at the touch of Jesus Messiah, the God-man, the person we're here to worship. Because so often our faith, or my experience, my faith is a cognitive exercise. I understand it, but I gotta feel it. I need to feel it. And maybe someone here today needs to feel the touch of Jesus right now. Touching the Untouchable. We're going to look at a familiar story today. Next week we're going to be looking at the story of two ladies. Two ladies who touched and reached out to Jesus. Touching the Untouchable. If you've looked at the news over the last few days, I've been captivated by this incredible story that is taking place in Thailand. I don't know if it is on Korean news. I follow the BBC because I'm British. And that's the news that we all follow. But the BBC has been covering this news, and CNN, Fox News, all throughout the week. 13 young boys, the ages of 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. Brian, same age as our children. Football players gone into a cave in Thailand. And while they were trekking in the cave, the Asian monsoon season is in full force and it flooded the cave. And the boys were trapped. No phone, no communication, nothing. I don't know if we could drop the lights maybe on the stage. The lights could be dimmed a little. 1 day passed, 2 days passed, no news of these 13 boys. And it started to break on international news channels. These boys were missing. A very similar story to 5-6 years ago with the miners in Chile who were trapped underground. 5 days. 6 days went. Still no news. This was happening this week. 7 days, 8 days, no news. The worst was feared. 13 boys missing, cut off, underground caves. Well, the Thai authorities didn't know what to do, so they called some professional divers. Actually, the divers came from England. And they called some professional divers who flew over from London into Bangkok, and they were taken to the caves to see if they could possibly find the bodies of these children. But they were praying for a miracle. The divers went in and it took 11 hours to reach through the caves, through the muddy water, the fast-flowing current of the caves, until eventually, and you can see this on YouTube, the diver came out the water with his water camera, and there facing him were the 13 boys sitting on a ridge in an air-pocketed part of the cave, alive but hungry and scared. 13 boys, 9 days missing, and finally they've been found. No food, no clean water. One of the search teams who was looking was killed because of the current. But eventually they were found. But here comes the problem. None of the boys can swim. And in order to get out of the cave, it requires skilled diving with diving equipment to get through the currents, to go underwater. The visibility of the water is zero. The currents are so strong. One diver, professional diver, was killed in his attempt, and it takes 11 hours to get from where they are to the exit of the cave. So they're contemplating right now today, do we put the children, do we train them how to be divers, which will take a long time? Can we really push these kids through? The other solution, which sounds tragic, but this is what makes it an incredible story, is wait for the monsoon season to finish and for the water to disappear. These poor children are now facing the possibility of 4 months. Till October, when the rains stop, when they can evacuate these children. Right now, they're waiting. They're bringing food, they're bringing communications, they're bringing videos. Their parents are waiting. I mean, can you imagine? You are the parent. Your child is in there. This was the news when the parents received that their children were alive. The video was beamed through and the kids sent videos to their parents, and this was captured by one of the mothers. It's not moving forward. Slide's not moving. Okay, it wouldn't be a Sabbath if the PowerPoint didn't work properly, would it? We've got the magic touch here. As we're trying to do, let's continue the story. These parents waiting for news, and suddenly they find the video of their children are alive, and they are looking at the video, looking at the pictures of their children who are alive, and the parents are reaching out to the screen, and so too are the children, wanting to touch, feel, hold their children. Because a screen and a picture just doesn't work. They want to hold their children, they want to touch their children. The power of a touch. Touching the Untouchable. Today I want to share another story. It's a familiar story. It's a story that we have read throughout Scripture. It's a beautiful story. But it's perhaps a story that we've read and often we've overlooked the real power of what is in this story. I've told before, the Bible is 90% narrative and only 10% doctrinal. Yet as Christians we reverse that principle of Scripture and we focus 90% on doctrine. And we talk little of the stories. The Bible is full of stories, powerful stories. Today I'm going to share one of the stories in the Bible. I'm a narrative preacher. My sermons are always narrative. And I'm going to try and bring out this story. So please, follow me as we go through this story today. Touching the Untouchable. The story is of a man. The man had been married, I don't know, maybe 6 years, maybe 7 years. Maybe he was newlywed. We don't know. But let's assume he'd been married for a time. His wife, oh, he had a beautiful wife. Everybody in town loved this family. He had children, 2 beautiful children. I don't know their names, but I'm going to call her Anna and Matthew. Anna was 3 years old, looks just like his wife, and Matthew is 9 years old. He's more like his dad. He has an excellent marriage. I heard that it had its ups and its downs, but generally they had a good marriage. He has a good job, and as a family they're happy. Young children, young adults, just starting out in life. One day he finished work early and he was coming back home. I said, what can I do today? I have the afternoon off work. And then he remembered he'd promised his wife that he was going to do the gardening for her. She'd always been nagging him. You need to do the gardening. The garden's overgrowing. This was a perfect time. The sun was out. The sky was blue. He went out. His wife was sat on the terrace. He took out his shovel, his spade, his garden equipment. Young Matthew, his son, came out and said, Dad, let me help you. Because that's what sons do. They want to follow and help their dad His younger daughter was talking to his wife, and they began to turn the soil in the garden. But as he was turning the soil in the garden with his spade, he took a look at his hand, and he noticed a kind of blister on the palm of his hand. It didn't hurt him, but it looked peculiar. Anyway, he carried on, but after a couple of minutes he realized he couldn't really carry on because this blister on his hand was getting bigger, and it was starting to release a really disgusting mess. He said to his wife, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can do this. My hand, it hurts. And his wife said, come on, you promised me you're going to do the gardening. Don't let a little cut on your hand stop you from doing it. You know, we always make good excuses, don't we? Get back to work. She cleaned it up and he carried on working. But after a minute he said to his wife, look, I'm really sorry. This is getting worse. I can't do it. His son was disappointed. It was a beautiful day, the perfect day to spend with a family. Over the next 2 or 3 days, the man could hardly pick up his hand. The blister had got bigger and bigger. The sore had got worse and worse, and now it was beginning to hurt. His wife kept nagging him, you've got to go to the doctor. But like many men, he was scared of the doctor, scared of the dentist. 5, 6, 7 days later, the blister on his hand is getting bigger and bigger, to eventually his wife says, if you don't go, I'm going to take you myself. Till eventually he made his appointment and went to see the doctor. He arrived at the doctor's surgery. He went into the room. He showed the doctor the big blister on his hand. His wife couldn't come. She had to take care of the children. The doctor looked at the man's hand and said, I just need to consult with my senior doctor. I need a second opinion. Your senior doctor came in, he looked at the hand, they looked at some pictures in a book, they compared it, until finally the doctor said, you need to sit down, sir. I have my diagnosis for you. The doctor looked at the man, but he didn't look at the man's eyes. He just looked at the man's feet. The doctor said, sir, I'm so sorry to tell you, but you have leprosy. Sir, you're going to have to leave this clinic immediately. You're contagious. You're going to have to leave your home and your town immediately. You cannot go back home. You cannot go back to work. Immediately, you need to leave this town and you need to go and live with all the other lepers who live in the caves and the rocks outside of this city. Leprosy. It's a word we throw around because it's lots of stories in the Bible, leprosy. But what does it mean if you were a leper? Leprosy was considered a curse from God. Profound impurity. To be declared unclean because of leprosy meant that the unfortunate person had to tear his clothes and put a covering upon his upper lip and cry, unclean, unclean. As the Jews were concerned that the condition was contagious, these individuals were to live separated outside the camp in caves. Ostracized from the community, they were left homeless without the support structure of family and friends. In approaching Jesus, as we will see in a minute, the man was in violation of the Levitical law. In touching the leper, Jesus also defied the Levitical law. Curse from God. A deadly disease, and all his community could say is, you are cursed by God. Leprosy. The man had been given a death sentence. Dying of leprosy is worse than dying itself. It means he's going to rot into pieces as he continues to live. It means that he can never go back to his home again. But you know what, this man, it wasn't the dying that scared him. It wasn't the process of how he was going to die, which was going to be horrific. His fingers would drop off, his arms would drop off, his face would start to fall apart. That was not what scared him. What he was afraid of was the complete separation and isolation he now faces. Let me explain. He can't ever go back home again. Ever. He can never see his wife or children again. He can never hold the hand of his wife again. Ever. He can never hug, touch his children again. Ever. He can never read a story at night to his children again. Ever. He can never sit at the family table and eat a meal with his family again. Ever. He can never take his children to his parents and watch them play with their grandchildren parents again. Ever. And if anyone sees him, if anyone meets him, which is highly unlikely, he has to fall to his knees with his face on the floor, ring a bell and shout, "Unclean, unclean, stay away from me." As he left the clinic, he walked with another leper to the caves at the outside of the city, and he thought to himself, maybe one last time, I can go home and just say goodbye to my family. Maybe I can explain to my children why Dad can't be there anymore for them. Maybe I can explain to my daughter why I can't be there to walk her down the aisle on her wedding day. Let me go home. Let me go home just one last time. "I'm sorry," said another leper to him. "You can never go home. You can never, ever go home. You can never hold your wife's hand again. Get over it. This is your new reality. You can never wrestle with your son again. You can never kiss your little girl goodnight again. This is your new reality. You can't touch them. You can't see them. You have leprosy. And if you really love your children, and if you really love your wife, you will never go near them again." So there it is. Alone, left to die, left to rot with all the other strangers who live outside the city. His family would bring him food every day. As he looked into the distance for a few hundred meters, he'd see his wife with the children carrying the food, and she would bring the food and she would leave the food under a rock, and then she would disappear. And a few minutes later, when they'd gone, he would walk to the rock and take his food. This was his new reality. Isolation. Cursed by God. The only way he could see his children grow was when they came with their mom and put their food. But he couldn't speak to them. He couldn't talk to them. He could only see them from a distance. Yet year after year after year, he saw how his children were growing up. Every day when his wife left the food, he could see the tears in her eyes as she left the food and walked away. A few years later, he started to wish that they would not come anymore. He just didn't want them to see him. He didn't want them to see their dad with his hair falling out, his disfigured face, He'd lost fingers, his nose, his ears. He was falling apart and he looked repulsive. Can't let my daughter see her father like this. He had all sorts of bizarre thoughts. He thought of jumping off those rocks and wondered why he'd been cursed by God. Then one day, something happened. Something incredible happened. Let me tell you my version of events. Luke writes a book. He calls it a gospel. It's named after himself. He tells this story. But let me try to tell you some details that even I don't know. Well,